The Trump administration is working to cut the time it will take to develop and distribute a coronavirus vaccine. It's called Operation Warp Speed. The plan comes one day after the nation's top infectious disease expert highlighted a potential treatment. Dr. Anthony Fauci announced the drug remdesivir was showing promising results in clinical trials. Meanwhile, unemployment claims in the U.S. have topped 30 million. But President Trump tried to strike an optimistic tone while discussing the economy, saying it will bounce back. Natalie Brand is at the White House.
The FDA is working on an emergency use authorization for the drug remdesivir to treat COVID-19 patients.
The data shows that remdesivir has a clear-cut, significant positive effect in diminishing the time to recovery.
Clinical trials in the U.S. show hospitalized patients who took the drug recovered in 11 days compared to 15 for those given a placebo, a 31% improvement.
Although a 31% improvement doesn't seem like a knockout 100%, it is a very important proof of concept.
CBS News has also learned the White House has launched Operation Warp Speed, an initiative to fast-track the manufacturing of leading vaccine candidates.
Don't wait to see which works or which wins the bake-off. Start making the lead candidates now, so when the data are there, the next day we can roll it out across the country. It's key to think forward.
For the third day in a row, President Trump is meeting with a state governor. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy visited the White House this morning.
Financial assistance we need, and we need a significant amount. This is a big hit, and this is somewhere in New Jersey alone could be $20 to $30 billion. But this is to allow us to keep firefighters, teachers, police, EMS on the payroll.
The president has been talking with governors about their plans to reopen states.
I think we're going to have potentially a great fourth quarter. There's tremendous pent-up demand.
CBS News has confirmed a report that economic advisors on the Reopening Council sent a memo saying they believe these 9 states will lead an economic recovery. President Trump is scheduled to travel to one of those states, Arizona, next Tuesday. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
Zeke Miller joins me now. He's a CBSN political contributor and White House reporter for the Associated Press. Zeke, good to see you. Let's start with the president's upcoming travel. His trip to Arizona next week will be the first time he leaves the D.C. area in over a month. President Trump said Wednesday he wants to get back to holding large rallies. So is this a step towards that?
It really is the first step. It's a crawl before you walk, before you hold massive rallies of tens of thousands of people in an arena. It's sort of a proof of concept by the president, just to show that he is able to travel. The footprint around the bubble around the president can go from place to place, even as much of the nation remains still shut down amid this coronavirus pandemic. Obviously, some states are beginning to reopen in the next few days, and this is the opening move by the president to himself show that parts of the country, at least, are reopening for business.
Well, the president will also travel to Camp David this weekend. What are some of the logistical and security challenges associated with these trips, and are there concerns about the health risks to the president and those traveling with him?
Obviously, wherever the president is, there's a huge staff of security and a bubble that moves around him. At the White House, it's obviously a smaller footprint than it would be if he's anywhere else. Camp David is being the lone exception because that is already a restricted federal protected compound for the president, guarded mostly by Marines. Presumably there, everyone is going to be tested. But when it comes to moving the president most of the way across the country over to Arizona, you're talking about multiple military airlifts, press coming along, press on the ground, people, attendees at the event. So far, it seems the administration is going to be testing a whole lot of people who may potentially come in contact with the president as they try to keep the president safe while also trying to show that the country can reopen.
Right. Well, Zeke, I also want to ask you about some of your recent reporting, which says that President Trump erupted at his top political advisors last week over sliding poll numbers. You and your colleague Jonathan Lemire write that the president and some aides have, quote, simmering frustrations with campaign manager Brad Parscale. What is Parscale's current standing with the president and his allies?
Well, campaign and administration officials over the last couple of days have said that the president and Brad Parscale, the campaign manager, have patched things up a little bit, in part because Parscale has presented the president with some more encouraging poll numbers in the last couple of days. In some ways, it has less to do with Parscale himself than it does the broader trajectory of the campaign, where the president himself felt that 6 weeks ago he was riding high on one of the strongest economies the nation has ever seen, and then almost overnight, the floor fell out from under him as this virus took its toll, both in body count, but also on the economy. So it's something the president personally is very concerned about, and he's seeing the results of that. He was presented with the results of that in his polling last week and was very, very concerned and took some of that frustration out on his campaign manager. Right now, it doesn't seem to be that there's going to be any imminent shakeup over on the campaign, as there really, in some cases, in a lot of ways, isn't even an alternative to take over now. Parscale has been so entrenched and sort of synonymous with the Trump campaign at this point. It doesn't seem that's not the problem when you talk, for the president right now. The issue for him is the virus, his handling of it, and how quickly the nation recovers. Those will have far more to do with the president's ultimate chances come November than who is running his campaign.
Right. Parscale is one of those longtime aides who has been with President Trump from day one, really. I also want to ask you, Zeke, about a headline from Politico that caught our eye. It says that the administration is beginning to search for an exit strategy from the pandemic. Given the administration's messaging so far, what might a quote-unquote exit strategy look like?
Well, the White House wants the president to stop talking about the science and stop talking about public health advice and to leave all of that to the doctors. They want to move him to more comfortable, familiar ground. They want to have him talk about the economic recovery, about his efforts to try to both pass economic stimulus and recovery bills so far and what he plans to do next. Those are topics that the president is far more comfortable about talking about, and also coming after his misguided, in some cases dangerous, notions of people injecting themselves with industrial disinfectants. The president is probably on safer ground as he moves to an issue like the economy, and that's what aides in part are trying to do, is to have him, to try to leave the virus in the rearview mirror by talking about the economy.
Well, Zeke, I want to turn back to Operation Warp Speed. What more do we know about the administration's efforts to ramp up development and distribution of a COVID-19 vaccine?
Well, we know this is essentially the federal government assuming the risk that would normally be held by drug manufacturers as they sort of rush large-scale production of these vaccine candidates that are unproven, unvalidated into place, in part because if they do work, that will save a whole lot of time in terms of getting the nation back to sort of the old normal, not the new normal that will sort of be the bridge between once things reopen and when there's a vaccine, but really get back to the way people are used to living. So it is a massive gamble on the part of the federal government, because there's a chance that none of these vaccine candidates do work, in which case the federal government would be assuming all sorts of financial risk, but also that could potentially set things back. But the White House is very gung-ho about this project. They believe that they seem pretty confident that one of these vaccine candidates will pan out, and potentially more than just one. And they want to have as much of that supply on hand at the point when it's deemed to be safe and effective, so that they can get it out to the American people as quickly as possible.
Right. Well, in an interview with Reuters on Wednesday, the president said that China wants him to lose the election due to pressure from his administration on trade and other issues. There are also reports the U.S. is crafting retaliatory actions against China. Zeke, what are you hearing about this?
Well, we're hearing a lot of rhetoric from the president about China as he tries to cast himself as tougher on China than Joe Biden. It marks a sort of a new phase in the way the president is talking about the virus, which the intelligence community said today confirmed that it originated in China, sort of and trying to bolster, lend a little bit of credence to the president's assertions that potentially it was that they were still investigating whether or not there was a lab accident that led to its release, or as scientists say, more likely that it was just a naturally occurring phenomenon of an animal passing the virus onto a human. But the president has been toying with that notion, in part because he's trying to shift the blame for the virus back to China. He's blamed them in public for weeks now for not warning the global community early enough and taking the steps to keep the virus from spreading outside of China, and for not sounding the alarm and letting U.S. scientists in sooner. So as you know, when it comes to retaliatory actions, the White House says they're going to make China pay the price. We have yet to see what that will be beyond the rhetoric. White House officials say they have nothing to announce just yet, but that is certainly one of those watch this spaces. Because for as we know, China is not just a geopolitical foe, but an integral trading partner for the United States. So any action on that front could have a lot of impacts both on the economic recovery, but also broader foreign policy.
Right, a ripple effect indeed. Zeke Miller for us. Zeke, thank you.
Thanks for having me.